Well, Mark, Kim, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Jessica.
This is particularly fun because this is the first time you guys are meeting.
Yeah, I know. Well, I hope I live up to the stories that have been told, you know?
Thing. I was thinking the same thing about me. I was getting all paranoid, and we've heard a lot about you, and all fantastic things.
Oh, well, the feeling is mutual. So, all right, let's start with you, Mark. Give us a little backstory for a second here. You co-founded this company, and I'd love to know how you got into this. You're the head coach of Enlifted, as I said earlier. Your whole coaching methodology. How did you start something like this, and then why'd you get into it?
Out of need. I saw a woman have a very painful breakup that happened 4 years prior. And she was ruminating on it, obsessing about it. So much so she hadn't been in a relationship since. The short story was, and this is in 2003 in Thailand. So I moved over there because I thought I was a tough guy. I moved over there for the Thai boxing, and I was a fighter in the States, and went over there and had big dreams and fell on my face and turned myself into a grown man baby. It's a technical term. And lucky me, I ended up living over there for 10 years. So I lived in Thailand 10 years, which still sounds strange to say. I was only supposed to go for one, stayed for a decade. And the first 5, I was an elementary school sports teacher, which is where, once I really thought about it, was where I first started paying very close attention to my words. Because when you've got a group of 20 nuclearly level excited second graders that are going to the pool, and you pick them up at place A, and you got to get them all the way across campus, dressed out, swim the lesson, survive free swim. Everybody gets all their stuff dressed and get them back over to point A again on time. You got to get good with the words.
Yeah.
And what fun, super fun gig, by the way. And so went over there, fell on my face. Didn't laugh for a year. And lucky me, I found out about a place down on the island of Koh Samui that was doing cleansing programs. And it's a great gig. Go down there, you pay them not to eat. It's a wonderful business model. And my third trip down there, I went to an emotional detoxification workshop, which is where I saw this woman with a bad breakup. The short story is her and her friends, who was in college, got a house down at the beach. Her boyfriend and all his friends got the house next door, add alcohol, press play.
Sure.
And right.
Jersey Shore.
Jersey Shore.
I saw that show.
Any shore of the Americas during the beach week. And he hooked up with her best friend in front of everybody one night, and then dumped her in front of everybody the next night.
Ooh.
How cheap. And she's struggling with this story. She took it excruciatingly personally, or personal. And anyway, the facilitator, he talked about the words. He talked about the stories. He talked about identity. And he had her tell the story 3 times. First time through, he didn't touch any of the word choice. And she's angry and crying. Second time through, he changed up some of the words, and the thing loosened up. And now she's sad, no tears. And everybody starts to lean in. You know, when someone gets vulnerable, there's some smarter part of us than the conscious mind that goes, hey, when someone gets vulnerable and starts to share and transformation starts to take place, we lean in. No one was checking their phones, even though there wasn't phones for the most part, but everybody was leaning and paying very close attention, because this woman is starting to go through it. And the third time through, he stopped her at the sentence that held the whole thing together, Jess, and had her say it 3 times. Same sentence 3 times, so everybody's staring at the same configuration of words or the same spell, everybody. Webster's definition of a spell, not mine, a word or a combination of words of great influence. And that spell, which was holding the whole victim-centric thing together, was he did that to me.
Yep.
He did that to me. he did that to me. And he said that last word, me, take that out and put in himself. And it was such a radical departure from the story that she had been beating herself over the head with for the last 4 years. So much so she hadn't gotten in a relationship because it was taking up too much mental real estate.
Yeah.
And then it was also influencing the way she saw men. So there was a lot going on there. And because that's how this stuff works, everybody. And she goes, he did that to himself. It went up at the end.
Right. Like a question. Yeah. That's what I was waiting for.
It was so different from the words that she was using. She hadn't practiced using words this way in context to the story. So it was clunky delivery with up talk at the end. So when the sentence or the question goes up at the end, regardless of the punctuation, it is a question. He did that to himself. And then it catches and you see the breath unlock. He did do that to himself. And then she started talking about how it was actually worse for him. His girlfriend dumped him and he lost a bunch of friends. And then she walked herself out of the whole story. She was, I was never going to work out anyway. That guy was actually really weird.
How powerful.
Exactly. And I went like that and I just pointed at it and I said, that right there. Cause I had a, he did that to me story. He shouldn't have been kicking that hard. We were just warming up. And so I had the victim villain mental imagery and context to this thing, which inflamed my pre-existing victim mentality. That was, it's very common for people to create a victim mentality.
Why do you think that is?
I know why that is. It's because we have a glitch in our language. There's two main reasons why that is. We've got a glitch in our language and an education issue about our language. Most people's education about their language, as in how, the words they use and how they influence them, is non-existent. Most people's education about language comes down to spelling, grammar, and definitions. So sure. One of the two reasons: one, people are unaware of how their language is influencing them for better and for worse. And number two, we're not taught what to do with those stories of ouch and pain and sting and woe that people keep up here and keep reliving over and over and over again. You make some improvements with those two things. So people's everyday ordinary language usage, and then you go in there with a pen, which might feel like it weighs 900 pounds. And you get those stories from in people's heads and written down on paper and put through a certain process. You're doing your process of the journey of dismantling the victim mentality has begun.
And is that really the Enlifted method?
Yes, that's where the conversation starts.
Yeah,
because that's where most. We agree. Yeah. And necessary and timely. Because some people, we've got a tremendous amount of information, access to information. And some people are done feeling like they're not good enough. They're done feeling like nothing's going to work out for them.
Yeah.
They're done feeling like somehow they're doomed to fail, which was me to the core. And yes, and that's where we start the conversation with our work, because that's where most people meet. That's where most coaches meet their clients.
Sure.
In the victim mentality, very few people book in for a coach when the sun's out.
Right.
And when you scratch the story and you get into the words, it's victim-centric language.
So powerful. We talk about it all the time here. The majority of the time we move away from pain. It's pretty rare that humans move into pleasure. And so we sort of wait until, like you said, it's like, I'm exhausted. I've tried everything. I can't live like this anymore. I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. And it's like, we wait until it's so bad. We get beaten down. We have these experiences, which we then will tie to stories, like you said, of victim mentality. This thing happened to me, and we get caught in this loop, and we continue to wake up every day and actually look for evidence to relive that loop because that's familiar to us. And so it's certain, right? And certain is more comfortable than uncertainty. And so we do things, whether that's immediately swiping on social media or getting back into the conversation, that's going to make you feel the same way that you felt yesterday, because that identity, what you've created as that identity, makes you feel comfortable and certain. So this is such a powerful conversation. I'm curious, do you still talk to that woman?
I only saw her then and there
Yeah. Okay.
for that one workshop. And at the last thing we did for the workshop, we got paired up with someone in the workshop, and one of us was a coach, one of us was the client, and we had X amount of minutes, let's just say 6 minutes, to work with this person in a certain way. And I didn't work with her, but I did work with someone, and they told me a story. I did my best, and then when it came time to for them to coach me, I just looked at her and I said, I'm sorry, I have to leave. And I got up and I
Wow.
left because I wasn't sharing anything with anybody,
Wow.
nothing. And I did go straight to an internet cafe and download the 80-page manual on how to do this stuff on your own, on yourself. And
Sure.
I went back to my bungalow and I started going into my story. So I never saw that woman again, and I didn't need to, because I had a desire to change the story I was telling myself, or my mindset. They're the same thing. So we have a definition of mindset. Oddly enough, that's very rare, especially a simple definition of mindset. Our definition, Enlifted's definition of mindset, is the story that we tell ourselves. That's it. It's a story we tell ourselves to ourselves about ourselves, what we can do and what we can't do, what we do deserve to have and don't deserve to have. And that story, you can change those words. And if you change the words, you change the story. And I've been doing this since I went pro January 17th, 2007. I've been somewhere between overtime, full-time and overtime the whole time since.
What a beautiful reflection too, just for the listener. You know, so much of our audience members, so many of our clients are oftentimes worried about, you know, is what I'm saying enough? And is my content good enough? And is what I teach going to be profound enough? And someone else is better and further, and et cetera, et cetera. And here you are almost a decade later, never having spoke to this woman again. Who knows if you'll ever cross paths with her? You didn't even work with her. You just witnessed her going through something. And it was so profound to witness that you went on an entire different trajectory of your life. You've created this incredible program, this incredible company. You've got all these coaches. You've worked with thousands of clients, changing their lives and their clients' lives. And so the ripple effect that has happened by you just being in the room with this person. And we're all so worried about, but my piece of content didn't get enough likes and it didn't get shared and it didn't get, you know, it didn't go viral. And it's like, but who was in the room? Who saw the piece of content that changed their life? And what did that turn into? And how could that change everything from there? So I'm so grateful that you were in that room and that you took from it what you did, and you continue to do the work yourself and bring this together. So I'm so excited to dive in already. This is awesome. Also, I was a phys ed teacher in an elementary school for 8 years. So I'm with you on the words thing.
Really?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Yep.
Cool.
I get it. I
Where?
get it. In New Jersey. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We were not on the show though. You know, the Jersey Shore.
No.
We didn't do that. We were not on the show. We were up in North Jersey.
Huh?
Yeah, but I was an elementary school teacher. So I totally get that. So Kim, I love you. I adore you. And I get to know all sides of you because we get to work together, which is so fun. How did you get involved in Enlifted, and what drew you in? Because, you know, having this short conversation, I can't imagine what was so enticing about the whole thing.
Well, so I met Mark first via another mentor of mine, Mike Bledsoe, who was one of my first mentors in the fitness industry. And I was working on building a nutrition coaching business and working in New York, which is where I met Jess, and finding a lot of challenge in coming up against what I now understand is the stories that my clients were telling me. The way I said it then was, oh, the excuses, their lack of commitment, their inability to be consistent. They're just overall not willing to work for it. Or, you know, there's always something in the way. And so the lifestyle in New York City is very, you know, hustle hard as you can, work as hard as you can, do as much as you can. And so a lot of my clients were these high achieving professionals that wanted to, you know, maximize everything in their life, including their workouts and their nutrition. And yet when I would have these one-on-one conversations with them, I'm getting bumped up against the same versions of the excuses and the stories and the reasons why they couldn't do it. So I first became familiar with Mark via Mike, who was teaching me some of the principles, which started with soft talk, which is we will definitely get into, and the language patterns that were.
Oh, we have visuals. Oh, join us on YouTube. We've got visuals. I love this.
Yeah. So so I realized like I'm starting to come up against the problems of people are using a lot of soft talk, which means that the consequence of that is they're lacking confidence, they're indecisive, they're unable to commit, and they're no focus, no clarity. And then on top of that, it was like they weren't able to set clear and powerful goals. And there was just an aspect overall of, I realized very quickly into nutrition coaching that it had nothing to do with how much information I could give them, how much program, like the best program I could give them. It was all about the mindset and the story, and which is a deep, like, rabbit hole to go down when it comes to food. And so I started learning from Mark just by being around you. Honestly, it was like, I didn't even really formally study with you. I just observed your behavior and how you spoke to people and how you showed up. And, you presented at that summit, and I started observe. I was like, what does this guy do? Like, this is different. And we kept in touch, and you invited me to take one of the first rounds of the certification, or early rounds of it. And I eventually said yes, because I was in a deep victim-centric story that I didn't understand why or how I had gotten there. I knew I needed help. I didn't know what help I needed. And I justified it to myself that it was all for my clients. So I was like, all right, this is going to help me professionally, and I'm going to be able to, help them better, because I'm burnt out. I'm frustrated. I'm up against, like, they're draining me. My coaching is draining. I got into this because I loved it, and I'm not able to really make this thing happen for them. And so I took the level 1 certification that we offer for coaches, and I just instantly got hooked, because I realized how much it solved the problem that I was having in my coaching. But also for me personally, I had a very similar victim-centric stories that as soon as I got the change in the words and the different perspective that I was never able to see previously, so much opened up in my own life. There was a literal relief, breath of fresh air, space to breathe, which we talk about in our coaching certification, because breath is a huge part of what we teach, helping people unlock their breath because of how their language is inflaming their physiology. So all of that really aligned with where I was in coaching, and it helped me develop into a better coach. So I take our second level certification, and eventually Mark, he knew that I had done some marketing and background work in social media, working with Mike Bledsoe previously, put me in touch with Adam, who's the other co-founder, and had one conversation. And I essentially was like, hey guys, I know you want me to do some social media, but you need to build a business here. And then I built my own job, and here I am.
It's true.
How long ago was that?
That was in the very beginning of 2020.
Wow. So
that
3 years.
officially, yeah.
It's been 3 years.
Yeah.
Wow.
No, 2021.
Yeah,
2020 is when I took the cert.
Right.
Yeah. So
Wild.
Ultimately, the right combination of forming a team, right? I had a passion for the work. I understood our ideal client because I was them. I wanted coaches to have this skill set. This is, I talk about this all day, every day on our podcast with the students in our, that take our certs, with my friends. It is that important to have these conversations and to help people move through their victim mentality, because it's blocking you in every stage of your life. It's simple switches of perspective, simple word patterns that once you learn them, it's very difficult to tune your attention away from. And it's so easy to change when you know what to do. And it's very, it's fun and it's playful. And I've seen, we've had 350 students graduate through the certification, and I've watched every one of them have those shifts. It's a repeatable, practical system. It's something that you want to learn it, we can teach you. It's not this difficult, challenging, really complex way to view mindset, or you need, a PhD or a doctorate in psychology to figure out how to help people. It's very practical, and it fits so well into health and wellness coaching, fitness coaching, life coaching, leadership coaching, business coaching, all of the ways, because we all have stories, and we all, I was just writing this piece of content earlier. It's every coach is a mindset coach. And
absolutely.
What kind are you? Are you a fitness coach? Are you a nutrition coach? Are you a business coach? Are you what are you? Because the first thing that you have to do is help your clients change their story. And good coaches recognize that. They're yeah, of course, the first thing I'm up against is mindset. So it's being able to give people a real way to approach it, and a real tangible tools to use, rather than simply saying we kind of laugh about this and giggle about it, like the cheerleader coach, the rah-rah coach, the all the right answers coach. We're like
Don't let
personified in the
anybody
lit.
tell you can't do it.
Yeah.
You just need to believe in yourself.
Yeah.
Hey,
The
here's a good one.
motivational audio for a real coach.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't be so hard on yourself. Oh yeah, thanks. That's worked as many times as someone saying, honey, you're overreacting.
Yeah, calm
And they
down.
go, oh yeah, you're right. I am. Wow, thanks. It's
Yeah.
never happened. Never
Yeah,
will.
never will. How often do either of you feel like you're biting your tongue? So, love my mom, grammar police. Whenever I would speak as a child, right? Like me and Mike and me, like just always correcting, right? Take away the end of the sentence. What is the correct thing? Do you find that you're biting your tongue when you're not coaching people, just in the real world, having conversations where you kind of want to jump in and insert almost a reframe? Do you have to pull back? Is that something that you can't unhear?
It's something that is, once you get used to observing it, people's language, most people go through a phase where they want to correct people.
Yeah.
Here's a news flash. People don't like it when you correct their language, especially when you don't ask, when they don't ask. So
Sure.
it's a phase that you go through. Okay, yes, fine. They're using, what do you do when people are using so much negations, Mark? You just watch it, you observe it, you breathe. Like, and on our team meetings, how often do we correct, like quote unquote, correct each other? It's ultra rare.
It's what is
ultra
important.
rare.
What is important.
Which is rare because we're correcting ourselves, you know? I'll clean up. I'll use some soft talk and go, no, take out that maybe. No, we are going to do this and this is going to work. And, we Adam calls it a speech embetterment. We help people get their language working for them. And it makes everything easier. And the ancients knew it. What do I mean by that? So when I say, have you talked about abracadabra, right? I'm sure. Maybe not.
I think so.
When
the listeners definitely.
But yeah, our listeners don't know abracadabra.
When I say abracadabra, everybody listening, what do you all immediately think of?
A magician.
Magic. There's always someone that goes to Steve Miller Band. There's always a Steve Miller Band. Gonna reach out and grab you. And it's magic, right? And I lived in Ecuador for a little while too, and went out to lunch with some friends. And this guy knew I was into words, and he goes, "Hey, Mark, you know what abracadabra means?" I'm like, yeah, magic. He goes, "No, it's way cooler than that." And you all please look this up. Abracadabra is Aramaic, which is an ancient language. So the language the original Old Testament was written in, it's still spoken in some parts of the Middle East now, today. And it translates to "with my word I create," or "with my word I influence." And they would triangulate it and wear it around their neck to remind them of the power of the spoken word, because they were smart. They knew that if their language was working against them, whatever they wanted to go do was going to be harder than it needed to be. And so they studied the power of words. And so I have a master's degree in education. I came up in the public schools. I didn't have one course, class, or conversation on either side of that fence about how my language influences my imagination, how I see myself in my imagination, or how my language influences how I feel about myself, or how my language influences my posture, or how my language influences my breath. Very important. It's all spelling, grammar, and definitions. So, it's file the entire conversation under an education. It's a matter of learning.
Yeah. I want to hang here for 1 second.
Your own point on the unlearning part too. The part I want to add to what he said about noticing and observing is that getting over the past of having to correct somebody is irrelevant to me, because what I'm hearing, I know the language patterns well enough that I can understand where they're at in their story and in their mindset. I understand what the words they're saying are changing their physiology, their breathing, their posture. And I can observe them in a way where then I can either guide them differently, or I can have more clear communication. Because the reality is I, in my personal life, when I'm not in a coaching setting, it is I'm not there to coach or guide them. I'm there to control my story and control my breath and be able to meet them in the best possible way. And so that's what, you know, a lot of people talk about this work in coaching. Yeah. But also in like your personal relationship, conflict resolution, in negotiation, in ability of like public speaking, all the different ways that this could show up is about how you can observe the other person and get a more complete picture of what they're truly saying, thinking,
Right.
feeling, doing versus what they're literally just saying or you getting emotionally reactive to. So it's a huge asset in any other spot than coaching. And it's also something that when you know how to coach it, when somebody is asking for that, you can very effectively.
Yeah, that's when you turn it on. Here's
Yeah.
a very simple example that happened this morning. I took a call from a friend who's she graduated the police force, and she's now in riding in a car and not what she wants to be doing. And this is exactly what she said. She said, I think it's almost like I'm in my own way. Look at the words. I think it's almost like I'm in my own way. And I said, take out the think. She said, it's almost like I'm in my own way. I said, take out the almost like. Pause, dots connecting. I am in my own way. She said it just like that.
Why do we add so much fluff? Why do we add all these other words?
Making decisions can be scary.
Yeah.
It forces an issue. It forces an issue of confidence. It forces an issue of competence. And like you said it earlier, certainty versus uncertainty. I'll take the devil that I know versus the devil that I don't know. And the devil that I know is me not going for it. And if I tighten up my language, I get more decisive. I get more decisive. The vehicle speeds up.
Sure.
And I start getting into unknown territory and building momentum. And if I'm going in a direction that is scary for the majority of my identity, let's just say it's wrapped in a telephobia, fear of me not being good enough to do the thing that I want to go do. If that signal of a telephobia is strong enough, people will do all kinds of interesting things in their power to self-sabotage.
Sure.
And there are language patterns to self-sabotage. There are, and it's all parallel: self-sabotage, victim mentality, telephobia, which is a fear of not being good enough, imposter syndrome. And the great news is we can pick up a pen and start dispelling, which means to cast out those flavors of the victim mentality. Break those spells. The fastest way to do it, everybody. Alan Watts said it. He said, when you learn to think about your thinking, you become alive in a new way. Most people are not thinking about their thinking. They're just thinking. The fastest way to think about our thinking is to get those words on paper and look at the words, not believe what you have written down. Hey, I've got it in writing. Here's the proof. No, get it on paper so you can draft it, just like a draft from high school or college. And your second draft and your third draft, with it, just a little bit of education about this, you can create a better story for yourself, also known as a better mindset. And when that happens, a lot of cool things happen.
Yeah. Correct me if I'm wrong. One of the things that I'm hearing when you talk about it, when we use these sort of fluffy words, I'm sure you both have a better definition for these words, but things like almost and I think, up here comes the board. What does it say? Soft talk. Yeah. Okay, cool. Soft talk. Yeah, keep that there. Sweet. Take a screenshot of that if you're on YouTube. So we have words like I think and almost and hopefully and try and should and guess. And I'm reading off your board. Thank goodness you have a board. When we say those things and we remove them, would it be true that there's almost a sense of, I said almost, there's a sense of ownership
Good catch.
when you remove those words?
Yeah, there is ownership.
Yeah. And that's scary.
It's the best of news for people. It's the worst of news for people. Okay, great, sweet. I can take control of my story. Yes. Oh, 4-letter word. I have to take control of my story now.
Right.
And there are aspects of the victim mentality that want to be completely absolved for the things we've gotten wrong, the times that we've not shown up, the there's a part of the victim mentality in people that wants to be the exclusive victim in the circumstance, and they'll take that over personal empowerment. It all depends on the level, the intensity of it.
Yeah. Can we go back for a second? So you spoke about language before, and
Yeah.
I'm so interested in whether the language, you said words are powerful, right? We know that words are powerful. Does the word start in your head with what you think, or does the word count when it comes out of your mouth? And it's the chicken or the egg. So when we talk about language, which comes first? Is it changing what's in your mind first, or changing what's coming out of your mouth?
It's a good question. Most of the time it shows up in your head first.
Okay.
You got to think to do it. It's like very rarely do I go eat a brownie before I think to go eat a brownie.
But I feel that it's so
a step
subconscious when
further.
you're speaking.
It's not the words, it's the emotion, which is where like we haven't gone into yet, but our method is about locating the emotion and locating the stories that are attached with the emotion. And ultimately, if we use the brownie example, like most people, why are they going to go for the brownie? It's because they're, it's wired for pleasure. Yes. But also like, if we look at it in the context of back in my background in nutrition coaching, it's, you're eating or not eating because of an emotion that you're feeling, which is attached to a story, which is attached to your decision-making process about how or why you're choosing to do a certain thing. And so the way I think about it is like those thoughts in our head, they're very incomplete in our head. They move very quickly and they're fleeting, and they're it's without practice, it's difficult to notice and observe them. So you get into the things like mindfulness practices or meditation, and you can start to slow down and observe the thoughts. And then the next layer is to look at the words and to observe the words, and then be able to say, how can I change and utilize the words? And then when you get to the deepest, most complete application of our method, it comes back to the emotion. Would you agree with that? This is the first time we've been asked this question.
It's an awareness practice.
Yeah.
So whether it shows up in your head or coming out of your mouth or you're texting, be able to see it, be able to hear it.
Sure. Which is the case for everything, right? Awareness is key. My assumption is that when we're speaking, especially about something that we've created this victim story around, it is so subconscious. When we physically speak it out loud, we insert these soft words, as you say. And so I wonder, of course it's practice. You start to physically hear yourself say those things. And that's as you start to then catch yourself, and we can really go in with that pen and start to rewrite that story in the mind and on paper.
Yeah. And it definitely, the rate of the use of language influences our level of awareness of it. So the faster, here's a good rule of thumb, everybody, the faster the story goes, the less attention people pay to the words. The faster somebody talks, the less time they have to observe how these words are influencing them. And so the fastest way to slow a story down is to write it down. And another rule of on that same line, the faster the story goes, the harder it is to change. So as we moderate the rate of speech, we give ourselves more awareness. That's why it's easiest to quote unquote clean up your language in texts and emails, because you have that lag time.
Sure.
And also familiarity. So whether it's conscious or unconscious, familiarity is a part of this conversation too. So the more familiar someone is, the more time people spend telling themselves a certain story, the more believable it gets. And the more believable it gets, the less aware they are about those words, because they're so used to using them. It's they're so used to believing that story that it's basically an unconscious response. It's an automatic response to a question or an experience or someone, hey, I had my boyfriend cheated on me down at the beach with, oh my God, me too. And then it just comes out, and it's
right.
Here, most people are very unaware of the words that they use, and they're convinced that it's right because it's their own voice in their own head.
Sure. They've created the truth. Do you think that
Very
there's
seductive. It's very seductive.
Yeah, very seductive. Do you think that emotion starts to dissipate over repetition of time and usage of the same story, right? Where you get to a place where you've been saying the same story for 5 years. Does it no longer hold the potency of emotion that it once did, but now it's just become your truth and you just sort of say it, it rolls off the tongue?
It could for some people. For
Is
some
it
people,
easier or
it's
harder to change when emotion is high?
harder. The higher the emotional charge, the tighter the breath is going to be in the chest. The tighter the breath is in the chest, the harder it is. So breath trapped in the chest is attachment to the story. The stronger the emotion, the tighter and higher and tight the breath is in the chest, the stronger the attachment, also known as the belief. So the more strongly someone believes a story, or the stronger as the emotions increase, so does their belief that this story is true.
Right. Do you have some physical signs or I don't want to say symptoms, but sort of signals that you can see if someone is in that heightened state, that emotion, that breath is not there? Are there some things that you can point out that would be a physical sign?
It's so different for everybody. It's like some people will physically close off. Some people will get visibly tense. Some people will start to their face gets bright red, or they're starting to cry. They some people will just it's all these subconscious tics. And so
The through line of it is the breath trapped in the chest.
Yeah. That's the
Is
only
that short breathing?
Yeah, that's sympathetic nervous system response, shallow breathing, labored breathing, coastal breathing, short breathing.
And this is why breath is so important in the Enlifted method, right?
Yeah.
It's why breath is so important in any transformation practice.
So in Enlifted, are you actually teaching breath work? And if so, what type of breath work? Because there's so many different types. And is it something that you're saying every time you feel triggered, you're going to come back to the breath? Or is it every time you're going to go do something important? Or is it only when you're going to go speak on stage? When are you sort of bringing the breath in?
There's a variety of aspects of using the Enlifted method that we talk about breath in different capacities. So the first things first, when it comes to coaching, low and slow. Get your breath low and slow and keep it there, especially if you're helping someone with their mindset and their story. Because if you're going into some of those stuck stories, they're going to have emotional responses. And if a coach is working with their client in that capacity and they are unaware of where they're breathing and their client gets emotional, their breath is trapped in the chest, and the coach goes there too, because for whatever reason, they're uncomfortable with their emotional responses, then you have something called drama bonding, which is very close to trauma bonding. And it's very messy. So when a coach keeps their breath low and slow, we have a saying in the community, good breathing equals good coaching, because good breathing equals good listening, and good listening equals good coaching. So good breathing equals good coaching. So that's on the coach's side of the street. There's 4-stepping stories. So there's this tool in the Enlifted method called 4-stepping a story. And we incorporate breathing. I don't know if you'd call it breath work, but I
wouldn't call it breath work in the way that listeners might
anticipate it. Yeah, okay. You're not sitting down and doing a full-on breath work session. What you are doing is taking this 4 steps. I can do this real quick. Go get that story, specific event of ouch and pain and sting and woe, and write it down conversationally. There's a big difference between a story kept in the head and one written out. Conversational, full sentences. Then you read what you wrote. Most of the time, that's an understatement. A vast majority of the time, they're going to have an emotional response from the time they write it down, they read it. Step 3, they read it slow. When someone slows down their rate of speech, the breath begins to loosen up. And then step 4 is to read that story. Let's just say it's 2 paragraphs, 4 sentences, each paragraph, 8 sentences. And at the end of each sentence, you take a big breath.
We do this with my mentor.
Yeah. James Wetmore?
Yeah.
That's where he learned it.
That's certified, James.
Yeah. 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 I'm like,
Yeah.
this sounds very
Or-
familiar. I've been here before. It's crazy what happens when you read it slowly.
Correct.
Yeah.
Tell us your experience of that.
What'd you say? That was my
Reading,
experience.
tell us your experience of reading something slowly. You said it's crazy. What happens? What happened for you?
Sure. So the first time I did it with him was 3 years ago. It would be difficult for me to recall exactly, what the story was, but it was a story that I had created, of course, and it had an emotional charge to it. And he had me do it on a call. We were not in person the first time I did it. The second time we were actually in person, but he had me do it on a call, and he had me, write the story down, and then he had me read it out loud to him. And then he had me read it slowly. And the emotion, I can only relate it to, gosh, is it Louise Hay or Esther Hicks, the emotional guidance scale? Use the ladder, the emotional ladder. I'm trying to think of whose it was, but essentially like there's 22 emotions on the scale, and we move through them, right? And so the bottom, the deepest emotion, the hardest one, the heaviest one is grief. And as you move through them, then there's like anger and resentment and fear and all this stuff until we get to number 1, which is ultimate love and gratitude. And each time I read it out loud and he had me read it slower, first of all, it was wildly uncomfortable for me because I had to hear it and I had to like let it sink in and absorb it. And we were on a call, just the two of us. It was not like a group call, but I felt very vulnerable the slower I got. And it was like, oh, if I slow down, he's going to hear me. And then what might he think? But really it was about what am I thinking about it? And he would still interrupt me and make me go even slower when I thought I was already going so slow. And we did it, I think 3 times actually. And by the 3rd time, he had me breathing in between each micro sentence, right? And it was like basically every 4 words, I had to take a breath. And it was really uncomfortable. It was really powerful. But what I found was that what the emotional charge was the first time was this heightened, whatever it was, anger, resentment, bitterness. Then it moved to like sadness and almost like a loss or a grief. And then by the end, it like no longer had the control over me, where it wasn't mine anymore. It just was. And similar to how you started, where this woman realized it wasn't that this thing happened to her, but this thing rather happened to him. And all of a sudden the weight comes off your shoulders. And that's essentially what had happened to me when he had me doing this story. And I actually just remembered what the story was. And I was very angry for so long at my mom, who did nothing wrong, but I had carried that for so long. And so it was so powerful. And I don't really believe in teaching things that I'm not, that I haven't embodied, that I don't fully understand, that I'm not certified in, that I don't comprehend. So it wasn't something that I was going to turn around and start teaching, but it did come up in conversations with my husband, Mike, who's also in the same coaching program, also in my business. And so we've sort of played that back and forth a couple times over the last 3 years together. And it's just so powerful when you do it and you start to recognize this thing that you've been carrying. And it's like putting down suitcases that you've just been holding for no reason. You really don't have to hold them. And we were just talking about it on a coaching call before this podcast, where a client didn't want to put the suitcase down. And I get it. It's like, you've been carrying that suitcase for 39 years and it's what you know, and it's comfortable. And as much as it's uncomfortable, it's like the story of the dog on the nail. It's like, why are you laying on the nail? Oh, it just whatever. It's fine. It hurts, but it doesn't hurt bad enough for him to stand up. And it's like, but what if you change the way that you're looking, putting the luggage down from you losing something to rather now you have these hands that you can be gifted something else and you can be, have the opportunity to hold something more. So thank you for reminding me of that exercise, because now I can go back and use it. It's one of the tools in my personal arsenal.
Yeah, I relate a lot to what you're talking about, Jess, because you and I are both, I don't know if it's the New York energy or what, but you and I both speak very quickly and you have a lot to say. You're very smart. You're very articulate. And like, I was the same way when I first did this process, and the vulnerability was ridiculous. Like it was so uncomfortable, to the point where I was actually talking about this with a friend a couple days ago. I was like, the most vulnerable part of the experience for me was allowing the space to breathe. Like I could read it slow, that was fine. But then the second that I had to actually feel a full breath in and a full breath out, I could tell I still wasn't getting that full breath. Like it was like there was still this resistance in my body. And so much of what, the combination of what, bringing it back into the coaching space, when we're doing and we're thinking and we're achieving and we're going for it and we're checking things off and we're like, if you're listening to this podcast, like you're going for it. Okay. Like I know who you are, you're going for it. And when you have that high gear, it's so difficult to slow down sometimes that it is the discomfort of the slowing down is the reason why you won't. And so, and it's also the thing keeping you most stuck in your story is the speed at which you're working in your story. And I'm sure you've observed this in all the clients that you've worked with, because literally when I say all, I mean all, we all have gone there at some point in time. You start talking about something, you're expressing some aspect of frustration or stuckness, and you'll hear people speed up at the parts where they're really uncertain. And then you'll also hear people go, when they hit a point where they don't know what to say or where they're unclear about what their next step is. And when they hit that sigh of relief, you hear people say it's because they're like off gassing something.
Right.
And when you can combine the style of coaching that we teach when it comes to the mindset is like, get your clients to slow down enough so that rather than having to take those sighs of relief, you can have an experience where you're looking at the words, you're observing the words, you create space from the words, you no longer have that super high emotional charge. And then we can use the breath to loosen the thing up and down regulate us. So that's the thing that really takes us from that super high emotional status down to a, more relaxed place to be more objective, to listen, to create the space from the story. And once you have the space from the story, now we can take a look at, like the first layer of our method is unwinding people from the victim mentality and that stuck upregulated state. The second portion is about getting people action prone and setting them up to go actively and decisively and clearly step into the next thing that they want to do, which is really, you've talked yourself out of things before plenty of times. Do you know how to talk yourself into doing something, which is the part that, every coach needs to know how to support their client on. How can you because I'm not here to talk you into anything. You want to do this and I'm going to guide you and you're the hero in this story. So you are going to talk you into doing the thing. And the language patterns is how you do it. But first, before you can get people in the direction they want to go, you've got to let those suitcases down. You got to clear the space, and that ability to get them down regulated and to create the space in the first place is the hard part. Yeah. And that's where most mindset coaches are never going.
Right.
Most people, they don't know how to, they don't know, they don't have a system. They don't have a tool. They don't know where to look. And so it's, they're trying to get people action prone and they're trying to get them to go do the thing and go out there and work on this. And what if you look at it this way? And yet it doesn't stick because of all the stories and the weight. So we love, the process of get them unstuck, start building some momentum, get them celebrating some wins, right? Because in the same way that people are carrying their stuck stories of where they can't get it right, or where they haven't gotten right in the past, they're also unable to give themselves credit for the things that they have done incredibly well. So in the same process of, looking at the stuck stuff, let's also slow down the wins so we can really celebrate them. And so we can really build up the identity of the rock star that we are, which will definitely cast out any imposter syndrome that you have, which is different than beginner syndrome. And, it's like the ability to recognize I am good enough, give yourself the proof you're looking for, and then set up those powerful goals, get people action oriented, very short term. This is what I'm going to do concretely, solidly. And it's, we don't coach our students on business, and they all improve in their business because of that clarity that they have around how to go get the thing done. Yeah. And so it's this process that we go through, and that breathing piece, like it's where people have so much resistance. And it's also the place where we can create that's where the magic happens. That's where it's the space to really get people into that receptive state to actually be coached and to learn and to see something new and different. So
you're pulling people outside of themselves really to become the observer, right? You sit in this victim, or even with the wins, it's like this ego, and then you slow down and you get to pull yourself out 30,000 foot view, take off the rose colored lenses. Now you're just an observer. It's no longer, doesn't have that control. And then you can take action from there. So, it makes sense. It's so simple. It's simple, not easy, right? It's so simple to say these things. The listener right now, they're nodding their head, listening to the podcast. Okay, I got this. I'm going to go do this. And then what happens?
Yeah.
The old stories repeat, right? And you don't have
the
tools, and it's so hard to do, and without the accountability and all of that.
It's
Yeah,
impossibly simple.
Yeah. And it's the thing that, and we talk about this with our students all the time. And I
Comically simple.
consistently remind people of it, that this is a practice, and it is not a like, oh, did this story, now I'm fixed. It is a consistent process and practice, and observing your own thoughts, observing what you write, observing what you speak out loud,
Yeah.
and continuously being playful with it. Right.
The
So when,
destination is the doing.
right. And
You're
it's,
not going to get there.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
like consistently practicing it, and then in for yourself, right? To be able to communicate more effectively, to like yourself more, to you go after the things you want, to have better relationships, to be able to make more money, right? Whatever the thing is you want, like the voice in your head is going to dictate how successful you are at that or not. And then the voice that comes out of your mouth is dictated by the voice that's in your head. I think it goes that way. It goes both ways. And the experience of being able to actively play in the game, right? Because without the awareness of how your language is working and influencing you, you are playing by a set of rules that you did not agree to or create. You're just believing everything that you're hearing and taking things in, and it's very difficult to be objective.
It's my voice in my head, Kimmy. Of course it's right. Abracadabra brought
Yeah.
James Wedmore to us.
Really?
Yeah, he was in Sedona. If I don't get the story right, I'm going to get it close. He was talking with the caretaker of one of his properties, and abracadabra came up, and the guy goes, "Oh, you should check out this guy Mark England on Instagram. They talk about abracadabra." He told him what it actually meant.
Right.
And he goes, "What, really? Magic?" He said, "Yeah, check him out on Instagram." And I get this message from James, "Hey, love your stuff. Want to take your cert. When can I do it?" Just real gangster. And I was like, I like this guy. And yeah, thanks again, abracadabra.
Yeah. It was truly magic. All right.
Yeah.
So clarify this for me. Someone coming in, obviously you work with coaches in all different industries and niches, but we all know, the three of us, that this work is powerful across the board. Do you only work with coaches? And then if so, are they teaching your methodology, or are they just using your methodology in their own coaching?
Good question. What do you think? 85% of
So,
coaches
I would
take the cert?
Yeah. So the direct answer about what we're doing is we're teaching them our methodologies to integrate into their coaching practice.
Perfect.
So similarly, you're a personal trainer and you decide, oh, hey, kettlebells are a really cool tool. I want to go use kettlebells, and I'm going to go learn everything about kettlebells. Now I can teach it to my clients. And so we are training people in this specific methodology and tool to use in their practice to make them a more effective coach. It's funny you asked this question. So we spent 4 hours talking about it yesterday, in a way that was about, what is the evolution of that? Are we eventually going to go right to, are our coaches going to teach other people how to use this, or are we going to go direct to consumer? What's that going to look like? Because this is, it's such a powerful tool. It does not need to be limited to coaches. And because I have a great mentor in you, and because I study how business works, I'm like, no, we got to talk to one person.
Right.
So
For now.
for now. And so the direct answer is that it's, we've found that the most success in this, and I'll speak for myself, and I imagine Mark will echo something similar, which is that there's the reason why I got into doing this with Mark and Adam was because I realized that as a coach, I could only reach so many people, and that I wanted to go bigger, and I wanted to be able to teach other people to like double, triple, exponentially grow my impact and give people, be a bigger leader. And so when you got into certifying coaches, it was a natural evolution in your career, was that I've done this one-to-one for people for a long time, and now I'm going to train other people how to do this. And so the coaches that, there are people who come through our certification that are not coaches. There's always the outliers that want to learn the tools for themselves, or they work in sales, or they're a teacher. There's different flavors of what is a coach. A coach is anybody who's guiding someone else through a journey in a practice. So the overwhelming majority,
Yeah,
the overwhelming majority of our students are practicing coaches. And they are using this as a methodology similar to how you described with James, right? They're not teaching you how to do it. They're just guiding you through it to get you the result. So
Right.
often talk about the mechanic example where it's like, I just want my car fixed, man. I don't need to know what you're doing in there.
Right.
Which is our
Absolutely.
coach, which is our client's client.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, cool. Good to know. It's been an hour. I can talk to you for another hour easily. We'll have to have you guys back on the show if you'd be open to it. Before I just end with some rapid fire questions, I'd love you to just sort of pimp yourselves out. If people are listening and they want to work with you, they want to find out more about it, the certification, how can they find you? Where can they find you? Information, tell us about everything, podcast, all of it.
Yeah.
Get him, Kimmy.
Okay. So the first thing that I'm going to do is challenge you. Go to enlifted.me/soft talk challenge or soft talk, and you can take the soft talk challenge. So that's where we started this conversation. And soft talk is the easiest way to have an experience with your language. And so the soft talk challenge, it's 7 days. You download the soft talk cheat sheet, which is, paper version of this handy dandy board that we showed you. And you're going to start to prime yourself to look for where soft talk shows up in your life, where you're seeing it in your texts and your emails is the easiest place to start. We talk you through the whole thing in the challenge. And then if you want to learn a little more about how the complexities of all the things we couldn't get to in this hour, we have a podcast that I host. It's called Get Enlifted. And the best place to start is episode number 1 called Learn the Magic Words. And there's about 11 mini episodes there that are about the methodology, going deeper into all the other types. Soft talk is one of many pillars of conflict language. And we talk about going in deeper on that. We take you through the definition of the victim mentality. We talk about imposter syndrome. We talk about shoulding all over yourself. So there's a lot of really practical tools in there. And that's a great way to learn and listen and have fun with it. And then our coaching certification is, depending on when you're listening to this, it is open in once every quarter. You can enroll and learn and do the deep dive study with us. So the soft talk challenge is where we push everybody to start because it's such
Gateway
a
drug, folks. It's free.
Yeah, it's free.
Yeah.
And you'll
We'll
get
put the
it.
link in the show notes for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You'll get it.
Absolutely. And then in terms of Instagram, because I know you hang out there.
Oh, yes. So at Enlifted Coaches, one word, ENLIFTED coaches. And then you'll catch Mark on there sometimes. Him and Instagram is a whole other story. We need an hour on its own. And then you can find me at Kimberly.Kesting.
Perfect. Okay, cool. You ready for some rapid fire?
Born ready.
Sure. We'll start real easy. What are you currently reading? If you're reading anything.
I'm not reading anything currently.
Perfect.
I'm reading a book called, I think this is right, Dark Cloud Country by Daniel Griffith, who's our buddy who does regenerative agriculture and farming out here in Virginia. And
No doubt.
This book is phenomenal. I'm like, it's a poetry book and a philosophy book,
of course,
about regenerative agriculture. And it is, I'm obsessed with him.
Interesting.
He's right across the river.
Yeah.
Very cool. All right. I'll have to download that. What do you want to be when you grew up?
What do I want to be, or what did I want to be?
What did you want to be?
I wanted to be a businessman like my dad. And to a degree I am.
I'd say so.
Yeah. I wanted to be a hairdresser and an art teacher and who knows what else.
I love it. I love it. What is one of the best pieces of advice you've ever given? That's for Mark. And one of the best pieces of advice you've ever gotten for Kim?
One of the best pieces of advice I've ever given.
Mm-hmm.
Slow down your rate of speech. Slow down your rate of speech and just watch what happens. I gave that piece of advice twice today on both of the previous podcasts I went on there, because they ask, what do we do? What do I do? And I have 2 pieces of advice. It's soft talk, cut that in half, watch what happens, and then slow down your rate of speech by a pinch and watch what happens.
Power in the pause. I love it.
I'm going to quote Mark on my best piece of advice, which is start and keep going. And I think people in working and building businesses and in any lane or fashion, that it can be that simple. That was revolutionary for me the first time I heard you say it, and I just stuck with it forever. I had the keep going
You're
part.
good at it.
I didn't have the start. I was like, oh, start and keep going. Got it. Okay.
Yeah. That's interesting. I feel most people fall off. Well, never mind, actually. I was going to say so many people fall off on the keep going part, but also so many people just don't start. So
Yeah.
it is a great piece of advice. $50,000 question. Either of you could answer it or both. If I were to give you $50,000 that you had to use in the business, you could divide it up. You can use it in one lump sum. What would you invest in? How would you use it?
Video content.
Yeah. I was going to say having a full-blown content manager who could create and produce end-to-end video content for us. And I don't even have to think about it.
Yeah.
That's what I would do too.
Same, actually. We're right there with you. It's just such a thorn at this point, the sheer amount of content and platforms and all of it. So I'm right there with you.
Very
All right,
real.
as we wrap up, we named the company Digital Business Evolution because we believe you're always evolving and growing and that your business is somewhat a reflection of your growth. So I'd love to know about your next personal or business evolution, and you can both answer separately.
It'll take, at this pace, 6 to 6.5 years. So how long have I been talking about certifying the first 1,000 students? We're 35 groups in. We've got 65 groups to go. There's 10 people per cert. And once I get across that part of the finish line, then I will go into a support role for students who have been in the dojo for X amount of hours, demonstrated the proper amounts of proficiency and want to teach. Because in my personal professional opinion, if you want to own the conversation about anything, you have to teach it. It's got to come back out. And yeah, so 6.5 years, I'll be done certifying, I'll be done teaching this, and I will support the students that want to step into that role.
Incredible. I'm excited to watch it unfold.
Yeah, my next evolution professionally is really about, it's a culmination of a lot of things we teach, which is to be seen and lead on a bigger scale, which comes out to, being comfortable and confident on video with great presentation skills and solid speaking, and really capture and educate our audience in a way that is, it's calling me forward to my next level. We, hosting a podcast for about 1.5 years now, which has been,
How's that been?
It's the greatest joy of my job. I love it. And
You're good at it.
I have a lot of fun with it.
You are good at it.
Thank you. And it's, I'm not immune to the imposter syndrome, and I'm not immune to my own hesitations on it. And so I'm utilizing the tools that we teach every day to step into that more fully and really be seen and lead.
I love it. You're off to a really good start. I'll tell you that.
Thank you.
You're already there. You really are. So I appreciate you both so much for being here. This was a blast. I hope you can come back. Listeners, as you know, the best gift that we can give back to Mark and Kim is to let them know what your biggest takeaways were. So go ahead, screenshot this episode, share it out on social, drop some of your biggest takeaways, your aha moments, anything that you really loved. Make sure you tag them over at Enlifted Coaches. That's with an E, Enlifted Coaches, and tag me at I am Jessica DeRose. And as always, friends, cheers to your evolution. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you loved this episode, I invite you to be a part of our ripple effect and share it with a friend. And please, if you feel called, take 30 seconds to leave a 5-star review, and I'll be forever grateful. Until next time, cheers to your evolution.